From 2010 to 2012, graziers celebrated a run of wet years around the outback. For the first time in many people's memory, the Cooper was flowing from its headwaters, its entire 1,500 kilometre length, to Lake Eyre. Across the watershed between the Lake Eyre Basin and the Gulf Rivers, few suspected they would be fighting to save their country from the prickle tree explosion that was to follow.
Sesbania is on the headwater of the Georgiana Diamantina, so it's a huge seas base that is spreading. We are doing buffer zones around boundaries and we are spending quite a bit of money on it, but it's a problem that's a bit too big for us.
This dead stuff outside that we've sprayed around the trough here, it just grew from grass level to that in those couple of years.
Looking across this flat up here, you could see from one side to the other, and now you can't even see 100 metres.
Prickly acacia had been around for 100 years before in the 1920s that the state government recommended it be planted for shade tree in Western and Northwest Queensland to help the lambing seasons amongst sheep. The first explosion of prickly acacia would have been in the 1950 wet years. It wasn't really that bad because predominantly the country was still under sheep. But by the time the 74 wets came around, sheep had gone out and all that northern country had gone under cattle. And then we saw a doubling of the area under prickly acacia.
After the last big wet, graziers contemplated the cost of prickly acacia to their livelihoods.
Some of that Downs country now is only helicopter musterable. It obviously, nobody wants to buy it.
Until you've had it, people don't realise how bad it gets and how it can take over.
Eventually, if we have to sell this place, I don't want to sell a worthless bloody forest, you know.
It chokes out more grass than any feed value it produces. It can turn mustering into a nightmare, with its long thorns being a danger to people, stock and vehicles, and inevitably some stock escape muster. Desert Channels Queensland had been working with landholders to control weeds for more than a decade in the Lake Eyre Basin. Peter Spence oversees their weed program.
When I think about all the grant money we gave out over the DCQ's first 10 years, some people achieved a lot, but most people didn't achieve anything because no sooner had they cleaned the paddock up, the cattle then brought it back off the waterways.
In a bid to gain the upper hand, DCQ began testing new control methods and rallying landholders to tackle the weed.
Sesbania was one of the biggest field days that Desert Channels has ever had, and part of that reason was because we had some new technology. But out of that field day, the landholders told us it was all very interesting, but we need some ideas to control the riparian or the creek areas because they're areas that we can't get into and are very costly and time consuming. And unless we clean up those areas, it's a waste of time cleaning the rest of the paddock because we're just going around in a circle. We basically have the Diamantina River system, the Cooper Creek, and the rest in between are depression lines or gullies. There's no permanent water holes in them. And they are the areas that normally grow a lot of prickly acacia trees, and it dawned on Desert Channels that we had to eradicate it out of the core areas to make it viable then for the landholders to clean the rest of the properties up. Not only on top of all that, we had to work out a better way of finding where the prickly acacia was the thickest and expanding the quickest. Plus we had to work out a cost to the project so that we knew, landholders knew, and the state government knew what it was going to cost to do these projects.
They also had to pioneer faster, cheaper and more effective methods of killing prickle trees.
Now when we first started, we had a lot of trials. We had to work out what chemical, different country types, or different density of trees.
Ayrshire Hills was a strategic trial site.
The prickly acacia started on these hills, and as you walk down your waterways, you know, out to the west here, you see it going for miles, and if we don't stop it, it's going to end up into the Diamantina, and that's the main reason we started here, because this is a huge seed source.
A year later, the trials were paying off.
We had to work out, you know, where do we use the drone, where do we use the boys on ATVs, and do we use terbuthorin, do we use wet chemical, or do we use a mister? It was a very interesting couple of months. Two of the biggest for making equipment saving is one's the drone. We can do a hectare in 8 minutes, 800 to 1,000 stems or better thick. So that's, you know, that's the stage where it's getting hard to walk through. We can do that in 8 minutes with the drone. And the other big improvement is using terbuthorin in pellets. It's just so quick, basal barking. The benefit of using terbuthorin is you're buying yourself 3 or 4 years control because it stays in the ground. It's hard for them to see what we're doing. It's hard for them to visualise what we've done unless they come out and see it on ground. Once they get out here, we've had some good reactions. They can see what we're actually trying to do. And by doing this, we've achieved 2 special permits.
The trust and understanding allowed DCQ to negotiate an area management plan and chemical use permit, without which there was little hope of eradicating the dense core infestations.
DCQ developed the AMP with feedback from the landholders to remove some of the costs associated with weed control whilst ensuring that mature native trees remain.
It gives them the opportunity to kill those trees that previously, because of where they were, we weren't allowed to take our chemicals there. Clearly along your water depression lines, you want to save your natives, and using different techniques that we have, we've achieved that, as you can see behind me. And that also is a part of the AMP, that we protect our native trees, but we've achieved our goal of killing all the prickly acacia trees.
It's a responsibility of government, and me being a part of government, is to expose to my leaders the brilliant outcomes that have been reached here, and the passion that not only the Desert Channels Queensland people have got, but also the landholders themselves.
We've had our sceptics, but we had 131 people attend 3 meetings through the north at the start of the year. At one of the meetings we were at, 2 older gentlemen were holding the floor at this meeting, and they were convincing us that we couldn't do anything about prickly acacia, we can never eradicate it, and we need to learn to live with it. And we're at the stage I thought, well, these people want to live with prickly acacia, well, no use coming here. And then there was a young fella up the back piped up and said, I don't believe you, I don't believe in what you're saying, I'm coming home to take over Dad's place and I want to do something about my prickly acacia. So when the motion was put up, there was 32 people to that meeting, and 30 of them voted in favour of what the work we were doing. And that's, you know, the change is there, it's coming. It's been a long time coming, but the attitude towards prickly acacia is changing, and I didn't quite leave it in a better state than it was when I went there. So it was a big achievement personally to me to do that, and it was a big achievement to my field crew.
Because when you see an area come under control, it makes you want to go on and get more. You see that with your neighbours.
From where we started on the Wockingham to the top of the Wockingham River system, we had 100% landholder involvement. And then the other thing that really pleases me, that we've had shires outside our rapid area that we were involved in here, north of us, looking over the fence and coming to talk to us and saying, we're impressed with what you're doing, can you come and talk to us, and we'll see if we can get going on the same principle. And I was pretty excited about the first million, and that took us 12 months. We've done another million, but it only took us 8 months.
We're on the Wockingham system here at the moment. We've done, at this point, about 90 kilometres of it. We'll pill everything that we can pill with terbuthorin. All the native trees you can see around the background, we'll spray in a 50-metre circle around them to protect them. The toughest thing about this job is probably the heat and the flies sometimes. I'm born and bred Western boy, so even some days the flies annoy me, but the heat's a big thing. 13 days over 45 in the middle of the day, you know, you're all racked up masts, so forth. Before you know it, you look back over your shoulder and think, oh, gee, we covered a lot of country today.
All these people in the third year, probably next year we're looking at a fourth year. It just becomes too big a task because you've got to find the money. We've got methods to kill that's reduced the cost, and there's a whole change in what landholders think out there, and they want help and they want to come on board, except the future for funding is not very good. And that's a serious problem, because I personally believe that with enough funding and enough cooperation between state, federal and local government, our plan is achievable, and prickly acacia can be eradicated from the core areas in the DCQ area.
People aren't viable at the moment in lots of areas because of drought.
My father always taught me that when you leave the land to the next generation, it should be in better order than what it was given to you, and that's what I believe in. And I think this prickly acacia is going to, if we don't get on top of it, it's going to destroy the best free-range country we have.